In this episode of the Denoise podcast, we're going to break down the results from the ProdPro production survey.
Promise AI. What does the AI studio of the future look like?
And how an RGB color sensor for your phone could come in handy for virtual production. Let's get into it. Welcome back to Denoise podcast. I'm Joey Dowd.
I'm Andy Gunny. Welcome back.
Yeah, good to see you. So let's jump into it. We've got these results for a survey. They came out in January, but we never really talked about them. And I think it's interesting because it ties into a lot of what we've been talking about of will LA survive as a film production hub of the future? So this was a survey from ProdPro, and they surveyed 150 studio executives and asked them what their top 5 most preferred production locations were. And going in reverse order for the countdown, number 5 was Australia. Number 4, Central Europe. Number 3, Vancouver. Number 2, United Kingdom. And number 1, Toronto.
Oh, come on. Where's America, man?
You might have noticed the US was not on this top 5 list. However, California did come in number 6, followed by Georgia, New Jersey, and New York. So within America,
we're number 6, baby.
California was number 1. Globally, California is number 6.
Wow. I was not expecting this. You know, even given the current state of everything going on in LA, I was not expecting to not even be in the top 5.
Yeah, not be a top 5 ranking, to be outranked by Australia.
I mean, to be fair, Australia, it has just gone above and beyond to
Canada has 1 and 3. They've got Toronto and Vancouver.
Curious why Montreal's missing from here, because Montreal is the third leg of Canada, right?
Maybe they're after New Jersey.
Perhaps.
Yeah, it's still in the top 10.
Yeah.
The other interesting stat, also slightly sad, the survey also revealed pessimism among industry crew members with an overall negative sentiment rating of negative 23%. Australia was the only production hub where 50% of crew members expressed optimism about the industry's future. In contrast, California had a particularly low optimism rate with about only 10% of respondents feeling positive.
Yeah, I mean, not surprising there.
Yeah.
Like the reason we cover tax incentives and stuff like this is because things are moving so fast. We're in such a dynamic environment, and it's so important for a lot of people that listen to this podcast and their future and where they're going to live, where they're going to raise their family, to look at the stuff, right? Because it's shifting.
Yeah, 100%. We've talked about like the tax incentive, because I mean, that is the fuel, that's the incentive to keep productions either in California or where they decide to shoot to. A lot of these top competing locations have either just lower costs for production or good tax incentives. United Kingdom's number 2. We talked about they had announced a 40% tax refund for productions there. That's competitive. You know, Canada's had tax incentives. I'm assuming Central Europe does, or just a lower cost in general.
Well, the crazy thing here is I remember during the strikes when obviously all production paused, all of these places were affected. It's like a ripple effect across the world. From the decision-making and the sort of nuances of LA. So although we're number 6 here, you could bet that everything that happens in California is going to affect the top 5.
Right, it's still talking about production.
Yeah.
Which we've pointed out before, like production is one part of the process, but like the writing, the producing, the funding, a lot of that is still post-production in California and LA.
We came very close to another pause with the Teamsters, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, it wasn't as drastic as SAG and WGA. What if there's another pause 6 months from now on some, perhaps an AI-related thing? What happens to everybody that moved to Toronto? Mm-hmm. What happens to people that are in London waiting for work to come?
Yeah. But are you seeing more local industries build up, where like it's the entire, like you think about the Korean produced shows where, you know, the entire production, like the creative, everything is happening in Korea. It's a show, and then it's either acquired or produced by like a Netflix or someone from the start. And then when like a strike or something does happen here, they fill up their slates by producing more content in other countries where the entire creative pipeline is that entire country, completely separate unions, completely separate system, and then basically just completely bypassing the US system.
100%. 100%. Yeah, we saw that with strikes with, you know, Netflix investing in Korea right around the same time. I remember a lot of the Spanish productions were really taking off, stuff in Barcelona and Madrid and stuff. So yeah, I think the minute there is any type of friction, because it's a free economy, if you will, you'll just move into places that don't have any friction.
Yeah. And these are content machines. Like they need, especially in the streaming age, they need to keep putting out new content to keep the subscribers. And
Joey, you and I need to put up new content.
It is a content game. Everything is a content game now. Everything is a content churn. Yeah. And,
twice a week, ladies and gents.
Yeah, every Tuesday and Friday. Yeah. And so if production's held up here, they got to get it from somewhere else.
Yeah.
And that gives, these other countries a chance to take the lead, which they have done here and surpassed the US in preferred. I mean, I'm a bit curious what the factors were of what makes a preferred location, but whatever it is.
Yeah. My guess here is the quality of life, the income versus the cost of living, and all those things that you generally don't think about in a production. I'm sure, Toronto is a lovely place to visit for me. I'm sure it's a great place to live if you're American, and a lot of American talent is probably emigrating out of the US to go to one of these top 5 places.
Yeah, and all these places, look at them offhand, it's like I know they have the infrastructure too that you need for high-end film production, the studios, the equipment, the cameras. They have the infrastructure. It's not like you have to ship stuff in if you're shooting in Dominican Republic or something.
Yeah, all 5 of these places have been shooting films for at least a decade, maybe 2 decades. So yeah, I think you could make a tier 1 film anywhere of these lists, and then of course it just gets easier and easier. So if you want to shoot a commercial, it's way easier to do that than to make a $100 million film.
Yeah, because the infrastructure, the talent, the BTL
it's already there.
Is there. Yeah.
All
right. So other story kind of ties into what does this changing landscape look like? There's an article about a new AI content studio called Promise. And so they opened up in November last year. It was created by George Strompoulos, former Fullscreen CEO, Jamie Byrne, former YouTube content executive, and Dave Clark, a commercial director and AI filmmaker, who was also talking at HPA the other week. And he was talking a bit about Promise. They're sort of an AI content studio, but the thing that stood out to me that was interesting with how they're tackling this is they're developing a proprietary AI production system that they're calling Muse. And this is an interesting model, and I think sort of the kind of key way to think about creative technology.
How much do we know about Muse?
We know, as far as what I know about it, and Dave talked a bit about it at HPA, but this was also when I was doing that live editing demo and I was on the side of the room, so I was only half paying attention to anything that day. And I wish I would post the recordings of these, but the way that it was sort of described was it's a AI system that they're building. I'm not entirely sure what that means, if it's like a very fancy comfy UI platform or something even more proprietary.
Yeah.
But the gist of the idea was building out a pipeline, and going back to our last episode, what we were talking about with nodes and pipelines and Flora, building out a pipeline, connecting all of the models, whatever their workflow is, but building it in a way where when a new model comes out, which it does all the time, they don't have to rebuild their entire workflow. They can just swap out the model. Okay, this thing was using, Claude 3.5. Well, now ChatGPT 4.5 has come out and we found it better. So we can just change the model in our little workflow, but everything else we can keep the same. We don't have to revamp our entire process. We can just change models and swap things out and consistently improve how they're creating things without having to rebuild everything.
Yeah, to me, it feels a little bit like how VFX houses have their own proprietary pipelines. So, for example, if you worked at Weta, for 20 years, you come over to ILM, you're not going to recognize any of the tool. You're like, oh, okay, I get it.
And so does this look like their custom built tool? What is when they were like, oh, we have a proprietary system? What does that look like?
Yeah, to me, I don't know if calling Promise an AI studio is the correct moniker. I would go more with AI VFX shop.
AI-driven AI
technology company, perhaps. A studio, of course, entails not just creation of the content, but also hiring talent, running a business, distribution, a legal department, all those types of things that make a studio up, having real estate, things like that. So this is definitely a glimpse into the future. I mean, Promise is, of course, not the only player in the space. We also have somebody called Asteria Film, who I think more or less is a competitor to them. And they're also building completely generative native AI pipelines versus the hybrid approach that a lot of the VFX companies are taking.
And what do you see as a hybrid approach? Like a combo of they're using AI tools and traditional tools, or they're...
Eventually, everything funnels into a CG environment. and there is AI augmentation, perhaps, but I would say it's still driven very much by a traditional computer graphics world.
Yeah. And I would be curious. I mean, I would be shocked if like there wasn't some other traditional compositing or something in Promise or these other AI-centric studios that still doesn't come down to like, we got the outputs, we got to combine multiple outputs. I mean, that was a huge part of the process with Airhead and the kind of original Sora short film when they were talking about like how...
That's the balloon.
The balloon. Yeah, that was like the very first Sora short and it was like, looks really cool. But they used After Effects a lot to take multiple outputs, you know, from what they would get. And then they would have to like combine, use traditional techniques to composite the best parts of multiple shots into a single shot.
You're probably using something like Nuke, which is industry standard for compositing. There's no AI. It's all hand done by a compositor.
Yeah. So maybe it saved a lot of time on the back end to generate the assets, but you're still stitching everything together.
But then maybe the difference between Promise, where I'm just guessing here, guys, speculating. Promise, if you want to reach out and give us a tour,
Dave, you want to talk about Dave, you want to talk?
Dave and both of us are connected on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Perhaps Promise is 90% AI driven with 10%.
Right. So they're kind of flipping traditional studio. Maybe they're using a little bit AI to generate some elements, but bulk of the work is done in Nuke or
that's my guess.
Compositing, and the new AI studios are flipping that.
It's kind of like maybe like a Tesla versus a Ford, where Ford makes a couple of cars that's EV.
Another analogy?
Yeah, I'm full of these, man. Yeah, whereas a Tesla is a native EV company, just makes electric cars. They'll never have a internal combustion pipeline. Versus Ford, they're making two different types of cars. They know EV is kind of the future, so they've invested in it. But not every car out of Ford is an EV.
Yeah.
Maybe it's like something like that.
But yeah, I'm curious to see what types of content start coming out of these sort of AI first or AI driven studios. Because I feel like the initial stuff is more like an ad agency, or we saw this Coca-Cola commercial, the holiday AI ads last year.
Low hanging fruit.
Yeah. Commercials, music videos where, you know, they want to be experimental or try something different. They're the first to kind of try out this water.
Commercials take a lot of creative liberty. So do music videos. They're more open to new technology. I think we saw a Gauzy and Splat Coca-Cola commercial the other time.
It was a Gauzy and Splat?
Yeah. It was really, I was forwarded too.
Yeah.
And then during the early days of VP, you saw McDonald's and a bunch of other brands release VP driven commercials out there. So I think that's the right space to play in for a generative AI at the moment. By the time they get to film, TV, that's probably a couple of years out.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing something this year, maybe a short film or something that has like consistent characters, something that's a bit more in the narrative space that feels good. I don't know, for lack of, I don't know how else to describe it, but doesn't.
I mean, like just playing
feels
in the
less AI.
Yeah. I think the trick and the magic to having a product that they output that is going to be critically acclaimed and accepted by the mainstream is to not generate the humans. So keep human performers intact, get your background done by AI, get all of the VFX done by AI. But we humans look at other humans all day long. Our eyes are so dialed in.
Our lizard brains are wired to detect oddities and be like, ooh, something's wrong with this thing.
So the minute you want to entertain human beings, don't put digital human beings in front of those eyeballs. And if you do, you have to be careful about that and make sure.
Or maybe it's some factor of a human-driven performance with something like Runways Act 1, where you're able to kind of translate a lot of the performance into other character, but you're still getting a lot of the essence of a human performance.
And look, this team is obviously, you know, they're not amateurs. They know what they're doing. So my guess is it'll be in that approach where it's still a human-driven cinematography, a human-driven performance, just everything is boosted.
Yeah, a slight tangent. I'm going to go off on one thing within the AI space that I feel like probably is a big issue that rubs people the wrong way about AI is when people create outputs that use existing characters or use other elements, you know, a Batman, Star Wars, something, and then put it out there. And I feel like that stuff is probably what rubs people a lot of the wrong way. Of course. It's like you're taking
sacred IP
that already, you know, people like it's a shortcut to the emotional investment we all have in these characters because these characters were built the traditional way with like, you know, a lot of handmade movies or outputs.
A lot of creative experimentation, a lot of sweat.
Yeah. So, you know, I want to see like AI used for original stories.
100%.
Original creations. It's like you got the stuff in your imagination. Like this is the way to get it out there, not to do a rehash of an existing character.
Well, just a little bit of side story. Do you know the Matrix story when the Wachowskis originally pitched it to Warner Brothers?
No. And you're talking about like the very first Matrix movie?
Yeah. So in 99.
Yeah.
And they had to rewrite the script, I think like 26 times, because each time they would present it in front of Warner Brother execs, nobody could comprehend the movie. I mean, come on.
I mean,
they're like, wait, there's another world there. Yeah. So the Wachowskis finally hired like a world-class storyboard artist or something like that. And they were finally able to, on the 26th time or whatever, pitch it correctly and get the funding, get the approval. But, that like, what if they had Promise back then or somebody like that?
Or just all the tools now where you could like, okay, well, what if we could just build an animatic-ish, like with all the tools out there, Midjourney, Kling, and create a rough version of it or a trailer of our original vision so you could see what we're trying to tell you. After
The Matrix came out, obviously a lot of inspired movies came out, right? You have Underworld, which had the style of The Matrix with the lighting, the trench coats, and the grit, and there's a bunch of others. But like that initial vision to screen was so difficult for them. And I feel like all the barriers now are more or less lifted. So we need the visionaries to come in and do their thing.
Yeah. And also with the movies that come out and the complaints that like there's nothing original and it's all sequels and reboots.
Yeah. I don't know if you've been
use the AI tools to like make the original stories. Like
100%.
Barrier to make original stuff's going to get lower.
I don't know if you get a chance to go to film festivals. I went to Holly Shorts last year. Holly Shorts is one of the more prestigious ones here in LA. They're Oscar qualifying. So if you win at Holly Shorts, the Academy like looks at it. Yeah. So it's a good one to go to. And I went to one of the days where the filmmakers showed their movie, and then they came up to the front. They described to the audience like this was my vision. This is what, dude. Wonderful movies, amazing vision. There is no lack of talent. There is no lack of young filmmakers out there that can hit a home run. The question is, why aren't the studios not risking in investing?
And maybe this is what we need, like the Wachowskis, where it's like, okay, we got to like make the tools are out there to make something that looks good and you can get a good trailer or something to sell your vision.
Yes.
And maybe that's what we need to do now to like convince the moneymaker decision makers.
I would say if there was an AI studio that just specialized in movie trailers, like all they did was 1-minute trailers for young filmmakers to just come in and just nail it, that would be incredible business.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how much money young filmmakers have to.
Yeah, but then you maybe do an equity share, right? Like, so if the movie does get funded, you get whatever.
Pick up the idea, right? Yeah. Option the idea.
Yeah.
Make the trailer. Try to sell it. Film festivals. Do you remember the LA Film Festival that used to exist before they shut down?
Yeah.
Yeah, we have our short doc was in there, Dolphin Lover, about a guy that has a romantic love affair with a dolphin.
Oh.
It won Best Short Documentary at the festival.
Awesome.
Yeah, qualified for the Academy Awards.
Oh, great.
And then the festival shut down.
Oh, dude, but congrats on that win, though.
That's not going to say it was from Dolphin Lover, but
yeah. No, I actually
maybe it was.
I think I told you this. I have a friend who saw your work. He was like, dude, you got to watch this movie. I was like, I don't know about this.
I feel like weird. Just Google Dolphin Lover. It's on YouTube.
Yeah. Well, Space Rider, the short film that I executive produced, was at Holly Shorts, and that's why I was there. And we didn't win, so we didn't get the Oscar qualification. But I got a chance to meet other filmmakers and pretend to be a filmmaker myself.
You are a filmmaker.
It was awesome. I mean, there's just so much talent all over the world. People that were there from Japan and from other side of the country and so on.
Yeah. I feel like with the digital revolution as well, it's like there's going to be a lot. It's easier for people to make things. There's going to be a lot more crap, a lot more noise.
Yeah.
But there's also going to be a lot of like new things that pop out of that.
I think we're going to be, in a few years, we're going to be thankful that early visualization tools exist, because we're going to introduce ourselves to whole new universes and storylines that were never possible before.
Yeah. All right. And last one, a new RGB color sensor. You flagged this one, Addie. So this is geared more for matching your paint colors at home.
Yes.
But you found this could have another interesting use.
So I'm a gadget guy. Yeah. I love my gadgets, and especially stuff that plugs into the iPhone. So I have a Flora. Flora is like a thermal camera that goes on the bottom.
Forward-looking infrared.
Yeah. So you can like detect where all of your leaks in the house powerhouse is.
Okay.
You know, it's good for like cold climates and really hot climates. So this one is along the same vein. It looks like a Bluetooth sensor that you point to, and it gives you a RGB readout, and then it actually gives you a color match, like a color patch.
Okay.
Then you take it to your hardware store and you can get the paint. A lot of times you just don't remember what can of paint that was, and then you have to redo the whole wall. But this way, you know.
And do you have to like stick it on does it bypass the issue of like what lighting is hitting the wall?
Right. The illuminant is probably super important. I think it says sunlight dependent. It's called the Nix Mini 3, and it's quite cheap. It's only $70. So when I first saw this, I was like, wait a minute, this is amazing for virtual production, because 9 out of 10 times we are doing physical to virtual match. And so you have a color value in Unreal or whatever, that's a hex value. And then your production designer, your set designer, they have to paint and match. So why not do something like this, you know, where you have a better match from the physical to the virtual?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I love any device where you could, especially it connects with the phone. You ever use, I think it was called Lumu?
No.
It's a light meter attachment that plugs into the originally Lightning port. I think they updated to USB-C.
Yeah.
And it had a color meter checker on it too.
Yeah.
But it was like $150, which is for a light meter, to get a dedicated light meter that's good is like a few $100s.
That's awesome.
It was great. It worked. Yeah. I mean, if I was like a cinematographer doing this day in, day out, I would get a dedicated light meter.
Yeah.
But for something out in the open where I'm just like, oh, I just want to get a kind of quick measurement, or like, what's the value here? Or even like, what's the color temperature reading?
Yeah.
Worked really well. And it was like a little small thing you could just keep in your bag and pop it into your phone. And
I love little gadgets like that.
Gadgets,
dedicated gadgets.
Yeah.
Yeah. With this one, I think my recommendation to every virtual production studio out there, put $80 in, just keep it in your drawer next to your computer in the stage. Anytime there is a practical set match issue with color, like whatever set piece that's not brown enough as the digital set piece, yes, you can go through a proper color calibration pass, color management pass, and still have a little bit of an issue. This will be the shortcut that you need.
So wait, what's the current process now if you're trying to match?
The current process now is if you do everything correctly, there shouldn't be an issue. That is literally the ideology that we teach, is like, look, you know, Unreal has to output ACES 2065 or whatever, and your wall has to be calibrated to that, and then Disguise or whatever media server has to be calibrated to that. By the time it comes out, it should be exactly the color you intend. And so you take that same color and you give it to your set designer, they paint the wall with that same color, it should just match. Right? But of course, this is the real world, and paint doesn't mix the right way, and so on and so forth. So you got to have a little bit of a hack, if you will. And I think this is that. When
you're doing this prep, do you factor into like what types of light you're using on set that's going to hit the props and how that should look? Yeah, generally, I mean, that you're right. That is probably the number one factor, is if it's a D65 Illuminant or a 5600K, but your Unreal world has to be lit in the same color temperature as your real world. Even then, you're going to have some discrepancy. And the way you solve for that is with camera LUT. So then you point the camera at a digital color chart and a real color chart. And depending on the differences there, you load that LUT into your camera. So that's how you account for it. Okay. And that's actually what the Sony Unreal plugin does, the RE Unreal plugin does for their individual cameras. And then Netflix's OpenVP Cal does it for any camera. Okay. Yeah. To create those LUTs to match the... Yeah. But still, this is like a quick thing where, oh, okay. Yeah, you want to check something, make sure the color matches. Can we get that paint in that color? Go for it. Yeah. I think I'm really excited for the future AI VFX shops, quote unquote studios. It is definitely what we need in this world, especially after the Technicolor collapse and us questioning what the future of VFX world is. If it's not this, then I can't think of anything else. But I still think you need that combo right now of like the expertise and the knowledge of like what a professional pipeline needs and like how to deliver to that standard. And then with the early adopter open-mindedness of being able to source out what tools are out there, what can do things, and how you can fit that. I think that into your pipeline. We don't say this to VFX artists enough, and they definitely deserve to hear this, is you are the professional, you have the eye, and you hold the quality bar, and that's good regardless of what tool you use. Yeah, right. It ultimately comes down to like, is it your eye, your taste, your expertise in that knowledge versus your expertise in the tool.
You spent your career looking at pixels and frames, and that is the relevant skill that you bring to the table.
Yeah, and that's something you can only also acquire with like years of looking at images and frames and knowing like what is wrong.
Exactly.
What's off
So
about it.
don't feel despaired. You know, there is hope. Pick up a couple of new tools, sort of retool yourself to be ready for this new world. Your other skill sets will still come in handy, but you'll need to complement with new skill sets.
Yes. Actually, speaking of skill sets, the one thing we did leave off about the Promise Studio was the other subheading of that news story was that they did acquire Curious Refuge.
Ah, yes.
Which is a AI training education platform.
Yeah.
And like clearly they're looking for that pipeline too, where it's like, okay, if they're building out the studio, they're going to need people versed in AI tools.
Yeah.
And so that seems like a very logical acquisition.
I love Caleb. I forget his wife's name. Husband and wife team puts out amazing YouTube content. I think you and I consume a lot of YouTube, so we're fans of other YouTube creators.
Yeah, especially, and this is how we've learned all these tools too, is like either messing around with it or looking at other videos of what other people have done. And
that's it.
Teaching about how they use it.
I think the majority of the world is doing
and we do it too. We do it. It is on the VP Land channel.
Curious Refuge is a refuge, if you will, of learning AI, nurturing this new tool into things that could be beneficial to you. And having them be acquired by Promise shows that what they do can now be scaled. Perhaps there's more investment, and maybe the AI courses could be taught more frequently to more people. And then that young, new Wachowski filmmaker out there can learn it and can utilize it.
Yeah. Or even just from their end, it's like, well, we need more talent in the pipeline. I mean, kind of same issue with like VP, where it's like, okay, you need more people versed in VAD, virtual art department type stuff.
Exactly.
Virtual production tool sets, same idea here. And I've been talking to more and more like kind of professional AI creators or that are expanding. And it's like, I need people that know how to use Comfy UI.
Yeah.
And it's like a very narrow skill set right now. Like that know how to use Comfy UI, but that also going to the skill issue, like have the taste and the skill set and the eye to know like what's an acceptable output and like what needs to be changed. And that's, I think, a very, especially if you're in VFX and like kind of going full circle, like if you have the eye, like just learn the tool set, because like the demand is going to be there.
Exactly. And I think there is enough jobs for everybody, because like I said, the number of movies, the number of projects is just going up and up and up. The budget's reducing. But having said that, a lot of these tools can bring a new level of efficiency. So you could perhaps get to almost the same level of quality with a much lower budget and still hit those criterias. So I think the industry is not going to die. It's not going to be, like we're still going to have great films and great movies, but this massive change management that needs to happen is happening.
Yeah, it's the crappy transition period.
I know.
Yeah. All right, let's wrap it up there. Thanks everyone for watching. As usual, show notes and everything, links to subscribe are at denoisedpodcast.com.
I want to do a special shout out to our YouTube viewers. Please give us a comment, and we're of course reading them. We're going to reply right back to you. So please engage with us. We'd love to hear from you.
All right, thanks everyone. We'll catch you in the next episode.